of the pictures from the latter time of the image that we had of the politician, the elder statesman, Mangosuthu Buthelezi. But the next few days, as people come to terms with his death and what the political landscape will be like without him in it, which will be very different because he's been part of that political landscape for such a long time, there are going to be so many views coming from various corners, so many wounds that will be reopened, because as we've said time and time again, he was a very divisive character.
True.
Who had very dark moments in his own history. Some have called him a collaborator, apartheid collaborator. Some have called him an outright murderer as well, where others have a different view of him as a custodian of their culture, and the list goes on. It's going to make for some very difficult discussions over the next while, isn't it?
No, very, very true, Marcel. Starting from Sunday, definitely Sunday newspapers will see a lot of columnists. I'm thinking of Mondli Makanya of the Sunday, of the City Press, who I'm sure probably will write something, and Sunday Times and all television channels, your eNCA and others. They'll be it's going to be a very, very busy day. Because we're talking about someone who was 95, who has lived alongside the likes of former President Nelson Mandela, the most revered O.R. Tambo, the former president of the ANC, and Nkosi Albert Lutuli. He was the oldest member of Parliament at 95. I don't think in the history of South Africa we had an MP who was 95 years old. So definitely we are going to see a lot of talks about him. Like you are saying, correctly put it, that he's a divisive figure. Some see him as a hero, some see him as a villain, some see him as a hero of the struggle against apartheid. Some see him as a collaborator. So, but as I said earlier on, the most important thing about us as scholars, historians, is to ensure that we fill in the gap. We don't take side or push a certain narrative, because a human being, any human being, has good and bad side. But the most important thing that historians and scholars can do is to ensure that all those sides are put out there for people to decide which side they want to remember him, whether as a villain or as a, as a struggle history.
Throughout the morning, we've also spoken to those in the political realm, talking about what impact his passing will have on the IFP, and talking about the younger leadership of the party very much having to step up and now chart their own course for it. But then I want to ask you about the gap that he leaves as being such a close advisor and his role within the Zulu nation. And I almost think in the last while, even though our colleague Siba Mandagoge spoke about the tense relationship that there's been between him and the new monarch, many, of course, saw him as that link between the old guard, following his role with King Zwelithini, and standing by the side of the new monarch. Many people will be asking who fills that gap that he leaves now.
Definitely, definitely, Marcel. You've summed up quite well. The Zulu nation and the Zulu monarchy is poor without him. He was this tall, towering figure to this nation. And also, on the other hand, the IFP, as much as he was no longer the active president of the IFP, but still, I mean, if you remember the previous elections, they still used his face. And I've got little doubt that even probably maybe next year, they were still going to use his face, because he's a very popular and iconic figure. So it's easy for voters, they believe the IFP said, to relate to the political party. But the Zulu nation, the Zulu royal monarch, as much as of late there were those disagreements, but it is poor without him. Same with the IFP as well. It is poor without him. Most importantly, as I said earlier on, the history of this country, political history of this country, especially the transition period in the 1990s. In fact, from the 80s, even before that, anyone who's writing it and omit his name will not be doing justice to the history of this country. Whether saying bad or negative things, but definitely his name will be there and should be there.
Well, the discussion will continue here on eNCA as we continue to bring you those tributes and various opinions on the life and times of Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. Thank you so much for staying with us this morning as we've brought you those tributes and those views from various quarters. And with me has been my colleague and wearing his historian hat, Mabutho Ngcobo, and I'm sure it's not the last that we'll hear from him as we charter the course to the time where Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi will be laid to rest.